Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Idaho PSAT NMSQT Accommodations Overview webinar. This is a detailed overview that the College Board and the Idaho State Department of Education are providing for Idaho educators in preparation for the Idaho-provided PSAT NMSQT for Grade 10 students fall administration. I'm Eddie Pulaski, State Implementation Manager and one of the College Board Idaho field team members. The link to this recorded webinar is being provided to accommodation coordinators so that it can be used as a reference for the accommodation submission process. All right, let's begin. Today's agenda includes an overview of the PSAT NMSQT accommodations process, information for preparing accommodations coordinators, a review of common accommodations, a review of the accommodations request process, and information about resources and support materials. As a general reminder, all 10th grade students attending public schools in Idaho are eligible to take the PSAT NMSQT as a state-provided opportunity. Schools or districts are responsible for the cost of students who participate in PSAT NMSQT in other grades. The PSAT NMSQT will be available to Idaho students on the primary test date of October 16th or on the alternate test date of October 30th. This slide illustrates key dates and activities for the pre- and post-administration of the PSAT NMSQT. Please note the deadline for submitting requests for accommodations for students who will participate in PSAT NMSQT. New for PSAT NMSQT in fall of 2019. Seating requirements have changed. The minimum distance between students has been reduced from 4 feet to 3 feet, measured from center of desk. Schools may seat 2 students at a table that is 6 feet or longer. Required staff-to-student ratios have been changed for accommodated rooms. The ratio is now 1 staff member per 20 students instead of 1 staff member to 10 students. Answer sheets have been modified to allow for more diverse gender identification. Test coordinators will now use their regularly scheduled UPS pickup or schedule their own prepaid pickup of materials once testing is completed. Schools will be asked to add a pink label to their return shipping box if they have irregularities to report. And finally, MP3 audio format will be a streaming download in place of a thumb drive. Thumb drives will be available as a backup if a school cannot download the materials. So let's talk about staff roles and responsibilities. To better align roles across College Board assessments, role titles have been updated for the SAT suite of assessments. The roles are titled Test Coordinator, SSD Coordinator, Proctor, Room Monitor, and Hall Monitor, and you'll see a description of the roles on the following slides. Specifically about the Services for Students with Disabilities, or SSD Coordinator. The SSD coordinator is responsible for being the school's liaison with the College Board Services for Students with Disabilities office, submitting accommodations requests for all students who need them at his or her school. The SSD coordinator will be responsible for downloading and testing the MP3 audio format in advance of test day. They'll also assign proctors if needed to administer the MP3 version on test day. The SSD coordinator may assist with finding appropriate staff for students who require assistance from support staff such as readers and scribes. Accommodations requests are submitted by the SSD coordinator in the College Board Online Request System, SSD Online. All accommodations must be approved by College Board in advance in the SSD Online system. Schools may have one or more SSD coordinator. However, one person will be identified as the primary SSD coordinator who will receive communications from College Board. Proctors are responsible for conducting a secure, valid administration. They're accountable for everyone in the testing room and everything that takes place there. They account for all testing materials in the testing room, conduct the testing, and monitor students to ensure a fair administration. Hall monitors and room monitors assist you and your proctors with test administration duties. Monitors do not administer the test, but they do help set up the testing area, monitor testing, and check the hallways during testing. The test coordinator and SSD coordinator partner to support students with disabilities. The test coordinator is responsible for planning all administration activities, while the SSD coordinator is responsible for applying for accommodations that will support students with disabilities. Test coordinators enlist the help of the SSD coordinator to assist with the planning and administration for students with disabilities. Let's talk a bit about College Board systems and access. A College Board professional account is required for all system access. Each user creates their own account at collegeboard.org to allow for a single sign-on to College Board tools, including the SSD Online system and the others that you see listed here. Access codes allow users to link their professional account to each system. Access codes are valid for 1 school year. They're specific for each system and are used with the first new login. Access codes are typically provided via email and will only allow you to link to the College Board account to the specific system that is identified in that email. New SSD coordinators should go to www.collegeboard.org to create a College Board professional account if you don't already have one. You'll complete the SSD coordinator form found at the website listed. You'll provide information about you and your school. You'll obtain your principal's signature, fax the form to College Board per the instructions on the form, and then an access code will be emailed approximately 2 to 3 days after receipt of your form. Please note that if you are the SSD coordinator for more than one school, you'll need to submit a separate form for each school you work with, but you should create only one professional login account. SSD coordinators use the SSD Online system to submit requests for accommodations on behalf of students. College Board will determine non-standard material orders to be shipped to the schools for the test day based on these entries. And schools can have multiple SSD coordinators, but only one should be listed as the primary coordinator who will receive communications from the College Board. Let's talk quickly about tasks for SSD coordinators. The SSD coordinator and the test coordinator collaborate to ensure a smooth administration. The SSD coordinator will need to supply the test coordinator with a list of students approved for accommodation and notification of any updates. This will prompt the test coordinator to order test materials for that student and update the master student list. A list of needed support staff for accommodated students, help with setting up any computers for flash drives or MP3 streaming, assistance with planning for rooms and materials. Accommodations requests are submitted by the SSD coordinator in the College Board Online Request System, SSD Online. All accommodations must be approved by College Board in advance in the SSD Online system. Some accommodations will be automatically approved upon submission of the request, while others will require documentation. It's important to note if a student needs temporary assistance for an injury such as a broken hand and requires a large block answer sheet, they should contact the SSD office. The support must be requested and approved before test day. The SSD coordinator will typically identify students who will be testing this year and confirm accommodations, use the dashboard in SSD Online to look up students or print the eligibility roster, submit a request in SSD Online for new students or students who need accommodations that have not yet been requested, verify the information for students with previously approved accommodations, such as the accommodations approved match the student's current identified accommodation needs, the student's name, birth date, and graduation date are correct. You'll also mail or fax updates to the eligibility roster, which includes removing students no longer at your school. And you'll submit requests in SSD Online to transfer newly enrolled students with previously approved accommodations to your school's SSD dashboard. The SSD coordinator will supply the test coordinator with the Nonstandard Administration Report, or NAR, regularly in the weeks leading up to the test administration. The NAR, which can be accessed through SSD Online, will be available about 30 days before test day and will be updated as accommodations are approved. Another important reminder, if students test with any accommodations that are not pre-approved by College Board, scores for those students will not be reported. So let's talk some about accommodations for fall 2019. Some terminology to remember: services for students with disabilities, or SSD Online; the Non-Standard Administration Report, or NAR; the eligibility roster. Each of these has a definition on this page. Please note that accommodations requests, the deadline is August the 27th, 2019, and late accommodation request deadline is September 4th, 2019, and that would include late arrivals to a school or district, or if the student has a new IEP or 504 plan. College Board requires pre-approval for all accommodations. Providing accommodations without authorization may result in the student scores being canceled. To help ensure that the students testing in your school receives reportable scores, we ask that you provide testing accommodations only under one of the following conditions. The student is included in the school's online dashboard of students with pre-approved accommodations available to the SSD coordinator through the SSD Online system. The student appears in the online NAR accessed by the SSD coordinator. Your SSD coordinator has verified the student's eligibility with the College Board SSD office, or the student has a documented College Board approval for accommodations. If a student presents an eligibility letter but does not appear on the NAR, you can test them as long as you have enough materials. Students with accommodations must be tested with the correct testing materials using the corresponding scripts. All students, including those who are testing with accommodations, will use the standard test books with dark green covers unless approved for another format, for example, large print or Braille. The proctor in the accommodated room should test students using the scripts in this manual. Accommodated students must adhere to all standard testing, administrative procedures, requirements, and timing regulations unless otherwise approved as an accommodation. College Board offers extended time, special formats such as Braille, MP3 audio, and large print materials, and other accommodations to approved students with documented needs. Some students may be approved by College Board for one or more alternate test formats. College Board offers these accommodations in alternate test formats for the PSAT NMSQT. Supports that are available for all students include repeat directions, time remaining notifications, and calculator for the non-calculator section. Standard test format supports include extended time, additional breaks, modified settings, reader, scribe, large block answer sheets, and permission for foods, medications, and drinks. And alternate test formats include Braille, large print, MP3, and assistive technology. Understanding common accommodations. The accommodations that schools request for students for the PSAT and NMSQT should be consistent with the accommodations listed in their IEP or 504 plans for instruction and assessments. In other words, students should already be familiar with using the accommodation. We recognize that some terminology used in the creation of an IEP or 504 plan may be different from the College Board nomenclature. For example, if a student typically has assessments read aloud in school, they may wish to request a reader or MP3 audio format for oral presentation of the assessment. The school can determine the best option in consultation with the student and the family. The College Board accommodations that follow are examples of commonly requested accommodations. The College Board provides many different types of accommodations and will review all requests that are made. When considering requests for timing accommodations, Please keep in mind that the student must use the entire time for which they are approved. They cannot move to the next section or end the assessment when they are finished, even if they are the only student testing. Some of your students must be approved for accommodations that require different timing and breaks for one or more sections of the test. Students who are approved for extended time only in math will get extended time only for the math section. Students approved for extended time in reading, however, will receive extended time for the entire test. A student can be approved for accommodated breaks of various types. During the breaks, students who are approved for breaks due to their accommodations are still subject to the same regulations that apply to standard breaks. You should post break times for them as noted in the scripts, and these include extra breaks, extended breaks, and breaks as needed. Students may be approved by College Board for aids and support such as a reader to dictate test questions, a Braille device, or a scribe to record responses. Some students may be approved for accommodations relating to the recording of answers. These accommodations may include the following methods: the writer, scribe, Braille writer, record responses in the textbook, record answers on an enlarged or large block answer sheet. Students who are deaf or hearing impaired may be approved to have a sign language interpreter to translate test directions from spoken English, or they may be approved to have a copy of the spoken directions and/or blank paper for communicating with the proctor available on test day. Students assisted by a reader will take the test with 50% extended time unless already approved for 100% extended time, and they will test in a 1-to-1 setting. Students who are assisted by a reader take the test with 50% extended time unless they're already approved for 100% or more extended time, and they'll test in a 1-to-1 setting. They'll need a script for dictation of test questions. That's used by the reader, a regular type test book for use by the student, and possible additional test materials as approved by the College Board. For example, Braille materials. Readers may read only what is in the script. They may not elaborate, but they may repeat questions as often as requested. Students who test with large print, such as 14 or 20 point or larger print, test with standard time and breaks using script number 1, unless approved by College Board for other accommodations. Students using test books with larger than 14 point print must test in an accommodated room. Students who test with Braille test formats have standard time and breaks using script 1, unless approved by College Board for other accommodations. The Braille type used is Unified English Braille, or UEB. The math sections are in the 1972 revised NMSQT code. Please make sure each student approved for Braille receives the guide to the NMSQT code and the Braille reference information. The guide to the NMSQT code lists the current version of NMSQT code mathematical symbols with their meanings. Students may refer to the guide during the test if they're taking the Braille test or using supplementary book or Braille math graphs and features. The Braille reference information contains math reference material required for the Braille test. Labels and numbers given with the figures can be found in corresponding locations in both the regular and large print tests. To supplement each Braille test, a regular type test book is included as a reference. The reader script will also be sent in case the student asks to have a question read. New this year, the MP3 audio format will be a downloadable application. The SSD coordinator will need to test the application in advance. If the streaming application does not work, schools may still request an MP3 audio format on flash drive. Computers used for the MP3 streaming application must have internet access, and once the test is launched, access to other applications will be disabled. Whenever possible, students should use earphones when testing with an audio format or text-to-speech software. If earphones aren't available, the student should be tested in a separate room. All students using an MP3 audio format will test with 100% extended time for the entire test and will have an additional 45 minutes to complete Section 2. These students test over 2 days. The ATC, or Assistive Technology format, is provided on a flash drive and requires each student to use a school-provided computer that has a USB port. Students testing with ATC will receive 100% extended time for Section 2 only. For all other sections, they'll receive the timing they are approved for by College Board, such as standard, 50%, or 100% extended time. Now let's talk a bit about requesting accommodations. The majority of students with a current individualized education or IEP plan or a 504 plan will have those same accommodations automatically approved. The entry of accommodations will go through one of two paths, either through school verifications or through documentation review. In order to manage accommodations, SSD coordinators will access their SSD Online account and use their dashboard to submit requests, monitor status, and print reports. To submit a new request, the SSD coordinator will click on Submit Accommodation Request in the upper right-hand corner of their dashboard. The SSD coordinator will confirm whether there has been a previous submission and if the student is a transfer student. The SSD coordinator will review the parent-guardian consent page and then select Continue to proceed. You'll enter basic demographic information about the student. Please note that gender now has 3 choices: male, female, and another. You'll select the student's diagnosed disability. You'll confirm the disability and the time period of the first occurrence. You'll select the requested accommodation or accommodations. You'll confirm the accommodations being requested. You'll answer questions about the student's plan and documentation. And as we mentioned earlier, most requests will be approved automatically through our school verification system. Based on the information provided by the SSD coordinator, the system will identify no documentation is required. In some cases, you may be prompted to provide additional documentation. When asked for documentation, you'll upload or provide the requested student's IEPs or Section 504 plans. You can either upload in SSD Online, fax, or mail the supporting documentation. You'll receive an email notification once the request has been processed, and you'll be able to log into your SSD Online account to view the decision letter. Requested documentation should always address the what, how, and why for the request, along with providing documentation that will be most helpful in the review process. And you can see the listings of those pieces of information that are most useful on the screen. Very quickly, the Nonstandard Administration Report, or NAR. The PSAT NMSQT NAR provides a list of all approved students with accommodations for testing. SSD coordinators will access and print the NAR from the SSD Online Dashboard. The NAR includes a summary of students with their SSD numbers, a list of students who will test with accommodations, and instructions for testing students with accommodations. The NAR will be available approximately 4 weeks or 30 days prior to test day. Now let's talk about next steps. The accommodations that schools request for students for the PSAT NMSQT should be consistent with the accommodations they use on a daily basis, both during instruction and on assessments. You should identify students who will be testing this year by confirming their accommodations are approved in SSD Online or requesting accommodations for them in SSD Online. You should monitor approvals of the accommodations in SSD Online so that the test coordinator may order any necessary alternate formats in the test ordering system. And finally, to receive testing materials, the order must be placed in the test ordering system by no later than September 19, 2019. So we hope that this recorded webinar will be useful to SSD coordinators as you submit requests on behalf of your students. Please feel free to contact the Idaho State Department of Education staff or your Idaho College Board field team members if you have questions. Thank you, and have a pleasant day.